Evening, everyone. Is this on? Are we good? Can you hear me? Oh, hello. Evening. Oh, this is cute, isn't it? It's nice. I feel like it's almost like pretend church because there's like no one here. There's just like no one to talk to. It's a bit weird. But in case this is your first time, in case you don't know who I am, my name is Alexia. I'm part of the team here at Metro. I've been doing an internship with Metro this year, helping out mainly with student stuff. So it's been good fun. But here we are, 22nd of December. Not quite sure how we got there. Anyone feeling Christmassy yet? Absolutely not. No? Wow, okay. No one feeling the Christmas spirit. This is a good start. Okay, well, we are talking about Christmas today, so that's good. But I don't know about you. I don't know whether you're one of those people, it sounds like not, whether you're one of those people who, 1st of November, you're right there with a bit of Michael Bublé, Mariah Carey, straight in with the Christmas tunes. You're not. Clearly not. Okay, maybe do you go for like the 25th of November, like a month until Christmas? I don't know, maybe you go for like the 1st of December? Or maybe it's like maybe tomorrow, the 23rd of December, that's the one, that's all of you. You're 23rd of December people, I can see it. But actually, a weird thing that's happened recently is actually, for a lot of people, the start of the Christmas period has become when the John Lewis advert comes out. Like, that's quite... Repping down there, Lauren. Lauren works for them, it's okay. She's not just like super excited about that adverts. But yeah, so like over the past couple of years, like the John Lewis adverts have become a massive thing, haven't they? They're like, when they come out, everyone's like, oh, it's now Christmas, it's officially Christmas. The John Lewis advert has come out. I don't know if you've seen the one from this year, the little dragon who... Edgar the dragon. The one he has, like, he likes the Christmas pudding and it's all really cute. And we love them all, don't we? Like, I don't know what your favourite one is. Maybe it's the one with the snowman where he goes and buys the scarf and the gloves, and it's really cute. Or like the penguins, or the Elton John one last year. That would be a bit weird if that was your favourite, I'm not going to lie. But my personal favourite one is the one from 2011. I don't know if you guys know it. The one with the little boy, proper old school. The one with the little boy, it's called The Long Wait, where he just like can't wait for Christmas Day. Hands up if you've seen it. A few, okay. For those of you who haven't seen it, let me explain it to you. It's like, honestly, I think it's potentially my favourite advert, like, ever. So, here we go. So basically, it starts with this really cute little boy. He's maybe like 4 years old, super, super cute. And you see him wake up on the 1st of December, and he opens his advent calendar. And then you see his face, like, drop as he looks down to the 25th of December and realises Christmas is actually a really long way away. So you see him over the next month just kind of like waiting the time away, kind of like throwing a ball against a wall, like playing in the garden on his swing, just kind of like doing all this like monotonous, boring stuff. And even at one point he like dresses up as a magician and kind of like tries to make time go faster, but obviously, sadly, it doesn't work. So you see him like go through all his nativity and everything, and then basically you see him get to Christmas Eve, and he opens his advent calendar, and then you see him in the evening sitting down having dinner with his family, and he quickly like shovels down all his peas, and then he runs upstairs, climbs into bed, and like goes to sleep as fast as he can. And then you see him wake up Christmas morning. This is the day. We've made it. He's woken up, there's like a glimmer in his eye, and like this is my favorite bit. Okay, I cry every time. It's really cute. So he wakes up and he rips off his covers, jumps out of bed, runs straight past the massive stack of presents at the end of his bed that Santa's left him. Exactly, I know, right? I know. Crazy. Yeah. And so he goes into his cupboard, opens a cupboard, picks up this like shoddily wrapped present and walks into his parents' room and really proudly presents it to his parents. And then the tagline comes on, "For gifts you can't wait to give." Oh, damn, gets me every time, like, I cry every time, it really gets me. I think it's just so cute because, like, in that moment, he runs past all of his presents, he runs past all of those new toys that Santa has left him because he wants to give this present so desperately to his parents, he's so desperate to give that to his parents that he just leaves all that stuff that's there for him and takes his present and gives it to his parents. And actually, like, there's not really anything in it for him giving this present to his parents. Like, he doesn't get anything out of it. And actually, he sacrifices opening all those new presents. He could have had loads of new toys and had loads of stuff to play with, but actually he sacrifices that to go and take this present to his parents because he thinks it's worth it. And actually, that's kind of like, that's with all presents, isn't it? Like at Christmas, we give a lot of presents, but you don't really get anything out of it. Like maybe you get like a sloppy kiss from your grandma, and that's a little bit weird. But you don't really get anything out of it. And actually, giving presents costs you. Like, it costs you time and money. Like, it costs you your Saturday line. You've got to get up. You've got to go down into rainy Cabot, and you've got to think about what you want to get this person. And then you've got to like stand in line with all of the screaming kids, and you've got to wait like 20 minutes because everyone's doing their Christmas shopping on the Saturday in Cabot. And then you've got to spend some money, and then you've got to spend more time wrapping it up. And actually, it costs you quite a lot, doesn't it, to give presents to people? And you don't really get anything out of it. But you do it because you think that person is worth it. You're like, I think it is worth me sacrificing my time, my money, and my energy to give this to you because I think you're worth it. And actually, we see a very similar thing in the Christmas story with the story of the Magi. Now, some of you, I don't know if you don't know who the Magi are. Let me tell you. Have you heard of the carol, We Three Kings? Yeah? For me, I actually had to go online and look up the rest of the lyrics because I only know the ones that my dad sings, which says, "We three kings of Orient are, one in a taxi, one in a car, one on a scooter, blowing a suitor, following yonder star." Anyway, really weird. And so I was like, wrong lyrics. Thank you. Anyway, weird lyrics. But actually, the more you look into it, they're all weird lyrics because the whole thing is completely wrong. So it's all a lie. Basically, yeah, it's a truth bomb, guys. It's all a lie. Basically, there's not three of them. They're not kings and not from the Orient. So, sorry to ruin your Christmas, everyone, but basically, it's totally understandable why you would think that. You'd think there's three of them because they give three gifts, right? So one each. But actually, the Bible doesn't say anywhere how many of them are. It just tells us there's Magi. So there could have been three of them. There could have been more or less. Also, again, they're not kings. Understandable why you'd think that, because they bring gold, don't they, as one of their gifts. And actually, back then, gold was like super rare, and it was something that only the really, really rich people had. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that they're kings. But actually, the Bible says that they're Magi, and so they were either magicians or astrologers or something like that. And then finally, they're not from the Orient. The Bible simply says that they're from the East. And so obviously, when we're writing carols here in England, the East of England is kind of like the Orient, like you think of China and stuff. But actually, in the Bible, it says they're from the east of Jerusalem, which we think they're probably from an ancient city called Babylon. So there you go. Now you're all clued in. So next time you hear someone singing that carol, you can be like, well, actually, it's all a lie. I'll tell you why. Cool. So now you know who they are. We're going to read their story. So we can find their story in the Gospel of Matthew. So this is Matthew's account of Jesus' life in the second chapter. And so it says this. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. Okay, if we just pause there, this bit's crazy. Like, to me, this is crazy. They came from the east to Jerusalem, right? Crazy, right? No, okay. So if you're like me and your geography is like really bad, we're going to get a map up. So like we said, they're from Babylon. So if we get a map up, this is the world. We zoom in. Wow. Crazy, right? Okay, so here's Jerusalem and here's Babylon, right? So it's quite far away. But actually, like, how far, you ask? How far did they travel? How far? Thanks for playing along. Great. Okay, so if you're like me and you're kind of like ancient Middle Eastern geography is like not great. Okay, so we've got the two on the map. And they've traveled all the way from Babylon to Jerusalem. It's not 50 miles. It's not 100 miles. It's not even 200 miles. That is over 750 miles. I know, right? That's a really, really long way. But again, if you're like me and you're like, your estimation skills aren't great and you kind of don't really understand what that actually means, to bring it a bit closer to home, that's like me traveling from London to Prague. That's like me walking from London to Prague. That's a really long way, isn't it? Yeah, that's a really long way. And actually, but again, if you're like me, okay, how long is that going to take? So I did a bit of Google Maps, and actually, if I was going to walk from London to Prague, if I was going to do about 20 miles a day, that's going to take me 6 weeks. That's a really long time. That's going to be like when we're like 3 weeks into our like 5 and 7 services. That's like a really long time. And so they traveled from Babylon to Jerusalem. And actually, they didn't have the little guy on Google Maps telling them where to go, so it probably took them a little bit longer than 6 weeks. They've probably got lost a couple of times, been around in a few circles. So like absolute minimum 6 weeks. So that's a really long way to go, isn't it? And so if I told you I was going to walk from London to Prague, you'd be like, why? Why are you doing that? That's crazy. You'd kind of be like, there's got to be some massive reward in it for you, right? Like, either someone's going to give you £1 million at the end of it, or there's some, like, really prestigious award for people who can walk from London to Prague, right? There's got to be, like, something really, really worth it at the end, right? But actually, if we read on, we see the reason why the Magi came to Jerusalem. So it says, they asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Do you see that? They came to worship him. That is all they came to do. They walked 750 miles, 6 weeks one way, actually. They've got to go back to Babylon, haven't they? So that's like 3 months out. That's a long time. And they spent all that time literally to come and worship him. That's crazy. I was reading this, I was like, I don't understand. And so actually, sometimes worship, we get a little bit confused about what it actually means. So the singing we just did, we call that worship, don't we? But actually, worship is much broader. And so the Greek word here is proskuneo, which means to bow down in reverence. So literally, to get down on your hands and knees and to put your forehead on the floor. That's crazy, right? They walked 750 miles to put their forehead on the floor. Like, weird, right? So, yeah. Actually, so when they get to Jerusalem, they're expecting a king, right? So they go into the palace, and they're expecting to go and like bow down in a palace. It's all going to be really big and grand. So they go to the palace, and they see the King Herod, and they ask him, "Where's the one who's been born King of the Jews?" And he doesn't know, so they have to get all their people together and consult some ancient scriptures. And so they look at the words of the prophet Micah, and they discover that he's been born in Bethlehem, which is this like tiny little nothing town. So King Herod sends them off to Bethlehem. And if we read on, it says, "After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him." Okay, so on our Christmas cards, this is like a really nice little scene, isn't it? You kind of like, you imagine some like synths in the background, and everything is kind of like glowing, and it's like the child's there, and they're all like bowing down. But actually, it's really weird. And actually, like, one of the best ways to really understand a Bible passage is to put yourself in the shoes of one of the characters, right? So if we put ourselves in the shoes of Mary. Okay, so imagine we're Mary, we're sitting there with our little baby Jesus, and suddenly there's this, like, knock at the door. So you go and see who it is, and you open the door, and there's these, like, group of people standing there. Maybe 3 of them, maybe not 3 of them. We don't know how many are there. So there's this, like, bunch of men standing there, and she's like, "Hi, can I help you?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, can we'd like to like bow down in front of your child." And she's like, so she's probably used to like a lot of weird stuff going on, right? She's just given birth to the Son of God. So she's probably like, "Yeah, okay, sure, fine, come in, excuse the mess." So she invites them all in, and then she's holding baby, and she's like, "How do you want to do this? Shall I like put him in the manger, or shall I like stand here? This is like a bit awkward." So she's like, "Okay, I'm just gonna like put him down." So she like puts him in the manger and just like goes and stands like awkwardly in the corners, like, this is weird. So these like Magi, they're like fully grown men. They come in and they kneel down and they put their forehead on the floor. Now this is like Bethlehem, like a nothing town. They're expecting a palace. And actually, they've turned up in this like peasant house, as like Philip showed us last week. There's the bit where all the animals stay and the guest room, which there wasn't room for them in, so they're in the bit with all the family. The floor's all like dusty. Everything's a bit gross. Everything's everywhere because just given birth to a baby. And yeah, they get down on the ground and they put their forehead on the ground. Mary's standing in the corner being like, weird, what's happening? And they like stand up and they've probably got like dust all over their forehead, so they're probably like filthy because they just like bowed down in front of a child. Like, that's so weird. They traveled 750 miles to bow down in front of a baby. And actually I was thinking like, this was a baby, like, yes, he was the Son of God, but he couldn't do anything for them in that moment. Like, he couldn't talk, he couldn't like give them a blessing or like give them any wisdom or anything. He couldn't even just like reach out and touch them. And actually like, he wasn't even going to remember them. He's not going to be like in the future be like, these are the guys who came to see me when I was born. Like, yeah, free ticket to heaven for you. Like, he's not going to remember them. Actually, the Magi they're literally getting nothing out of this. They're just getting their robes all like filthy. Super weird, right? And then it gets even weirder, so we carry on. And it says, then they opened treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Right, so we know nowadays that like these are expensive, right? Gold is really expensive. And as we said earlier, like back in those days, it was even rarer. This was like something that only kings would have. Like, right, they were expecting a king in a palace. But they still take these really expensive gifts and they give them to Jesus. They were expecting them to be like at home in a palace with the kings because only kings had gold. But they still take them and they leave them in this peasant house with a baby lying in a manger and leave these really expensive things kind of with the child. And like Mary doesn't know these people. They've rocked up at her house, bowed down in front of her child, and they've just given her a bunch of really expensive stuff. And she's like, weird, okay. So the whole thing is really bizarre, isn't it? The whole story, they walk 750 miles, they bow down in front of him, and they give him really expensive gifts. To me, like, the Christmas story gets weirder and weirder the more I look at it. Like, it's so unusual. It really confuses me, but it's really interesting to look into. And actually, sometimes because it's a bit weird, it makes it quite difficult to actually take something from it and be able to learn something from it, right? You're kind of like, okay, Jesus isn't here, so like, I can't walk to wherever he is and go and see him. I can't bow down in front of him. I can't give him gifts. But actually, I think we can learn something from the Magi about what it means to worship. As I said earlier, sometimes we can get a bit confused about what worship means. So like what we call here at the beginning, when we do the singing, we call that worship. Obviously, there the Greek word was to bow down. And so worship can mean lots of different things. But actually, there's one definition in the Bible written by a guy called Paul, who was one of the early Christians. And he wrote in his letter to the Romans, and it says this. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Okay, so to offer our bodies as living sacrifices, that's our true and proper worship. Right? I don't know about you, but like, that kind of scares me a bit, offering my body as a living sacrifice. For me, I kind of picture just being like literally left with nothing, like I'm living in like a bare room with like only the clothes on my back, eating like baked beans out of a tin because I've just like sacrificed everything. But actually, this isn't something that we have to do. This is something that we get to do. This isn't like our duty. This is something we get to do. Like with the Magi, no one kicked them out of Babylon. No one like forced them to walk all that way to go and bow down and go and see this child. Actually, they chose to do it because they thought it was worth it. And actually, with the kid in the John Lewis advert, he didn't have to go and give that present to his parents. He chose to leave his presents and take that present to his parents. It's something we get to do because we think he's worth it. Yeah, because we think he's worth it. And he is so worth it. So for the Magi, they got to see God. They got to see the face of God, God in flesh. And so for them, that sacrifice was completely worth it. So actually, when we look at their story, as we've said, Jesus isn't here, so we can't do all those things that he did. But we can take the principles and apply them to our lives. So firstly, we see that the Magi sacrificed their time. By walking that far, as we said, like minimum 3-month round trip. Like that's a lot of time to sacrifice. Actually, time is like one of the most precious resources we have. Like once it's gone, and you can't get it back, it's gone. And so actually, like where we spend our time really tells us about what we think is important. So actually, like we can use our time to worship God. We can sacrifice our time to be like, God, I think you're worth it. And so one way that might look is maybe in the morning, you might sacrifice 15 minutes of sleep. Be like, okay, I'm going to get up 15 minutes earlier so I can read my Bible and spend some time with God because I think he's worth it. Like, I really struggle to get up in the morning and I'm like really tired and I really need my sleep, but I think God's worth it. I think he's worth it. And actually, even if you spent those 15 minutes, your mind's all over the place, you didn't actually you read it, but it didn't really go in, or you don't feel like you felt God's presence. Actually, just the act of you getting up and sacrificing that little bit of time, that's your worship to God, saying, God, I think you're worth it. I think you're worth me trying to do this thing. Or actually, maybe a bit more practically, it looks like at the end of a really long day of work, your hub is signed up to go and serve at the Wild Goose homeless shelter. And you're thinking, I've had a really long day. I could just go home, stick on some trackies and some Netflix and just chill out. But actually, again, in Matthew, it tells us that whatever we did for those who are needy in our society, it's as if we've done them for Jesus. So actually, you sacrificing that time and energy to be like, I'm going to go and serve the homeless in our city. That is your worship to Jesus. It's not just about singing songs. It's about doing things and living our lives as living sacrifices. So we can sacrifice our time. The next thing we see the Magi sacrifice is their pride. So actually, as we said, they were expecting a palace. So bowing down in a palace, that's okay, isn't it? But actually, bowing down in a dirty peasant's house to a newborn child, that's gonna take some sacrifice of your pride. And actually, nowadays in our society, your pride and your status and how people see you, that's so important, isn't it? People cling on to that with all they have. But actually, when we sacrifice that for God, that's our form of worship. And actually, for me, this is something that I've been really bad at. While I was at uni, actually, I always prayed for my friends to come to church, really, really wanted them to become Christians, but actually was so bad at taking that step of sacrificing my pride and kind of just inviting them to church. Actually, that can be quite hard because you don't know how they're going to react, you don't know what they're going to think of you. And actually, in that moment, to me, how they saw me was more important than God, which is so bad because actually what he thinks of me is the most important thing. But actually, had I taken that step, sacrificed my pride, and invited them to church, even if they didn't come, that would have been my worship to God, saying, actually, God, I think you're worth it. And the final thing we see the Magi sacrifice is their money. They give these really expensive presents, even though this is a baby born to a peasant girl. They still give these really expensive presents. And actually, we've talked about money quite a lot in the last couple of weeks, haven't we? We've seen a lot of people start giving to Metro for the first time, which has been amazing. And we raised over £3,000 for Beloved, which was epic. And actually, it's been so amazing to see us become a church who worship God with our money. We're writing a story of our money being worshipped to God, actually sacrifice, maybe be like, I really want those new pair of shoes, but actually this month I choose to give that extra little bit of money I have away. And so actually, there's all sorts of different ways that we can worship God. We can use literally everything. And so when it says a living sacrifice, it just means using every single part of your life to worship God. And actually, but sometimes that is really hard. It's not going to be easy. For the little boy in the John Lewis advert, that was a really easy decision. It was just, he knew from the 1st of December that was what he was going to do. He was waiting all month for it. But equally, sometimes it is really hard. And actually, for me, this talk has been my form of worship. This first term is always so long, from September to December. It's really, really long. It's been a change of everything, like actually graduating and transitioning into real life is really hard. And so there's a lot of changes that you have to cope with. And so, term officially finished on Friday. So I could have gone home 2 days ago, and I could have had a stress-free week without writing this talk. But actually, I've chosen to stay and I've chosen to do this. And actually, it has been really hard. I've been completely knackered this week. I think I've cried nearly every day. It's been really hard, and it's been super stressful. But actually, I was chatting to Philip about it, and I was so close to being like, you know what, I can't do it. I don't have the capacity to do it. But he reminded me who I was doing it for, and he was like, actually, you're doing it for Jesus, and that makes it worth it. And like, for me, I was like, oh, yeah, it is worth it. Like, I'm so tired, and it feels really hard, but it's always worth it. And actually, with the Magi, like, if they'd taken their eyes off Jesus, if they'd taken their eyes off the reason why they were doing this thing, it would have seemed ridiculous. If they'd been like a week into their journey, and they were kind of looking around at the desert, and it being really hot, they were like, oh, lads, should we just go home? Is this worth it? Like, should we just sack it off? But actually, because they kept their eyes on Jesus, they knew it was worth it. And I think that's the key, isn't it? We have to keep our eyes focused on Jesus and know the reason why we're doing this thing. But actually, maybe if you're not a Christian here tonight and you're kind of thinking, okay, how does this all apply to me? Like, how does this translate to my life? Actually, the people that the Magi left at home probably had a lot of questions. The Magi left Babylon, and the people they left at home were thinking, like, why on earth are you doing that? Like, what would possess you to walk 750 miles to go and see a child? That's crazy. And actually, in that situation, so there's two options. One, they've completely lost their minds. Like, they're just nuts. Like, that's one option. Or the other option is actually, it's worth it. And for the Magi, obviously it was so worth it. And so maybe you're not a Christian and you've come here with your friend tonight, and actually you look at their lives and you think, I see you doing all these things. I see you giving money to the church. I see you getting up early to read your Bible. I see you doing all these things, and I don't understand why. And hopefully you know that your friend probably hasn't lost their mind. Like, hopefully you know that they're relatively sane. So there must be something that's worth it. And maybe that's worth looking into. Maybe that's worth looking into. What is it that makes it worth it for you? But actually, so I'm going to finish up. But actually, we can use our whole lives to worship Jesus, and we have to keep our eyes fixed on him. The reason why we're doing it, because he's always worth it. He is so good. As we were seeing earlier, he's a way maker, he's a miracle worker. He is so worth every part of our lives. And actually, it's such a joy to give up these things for him. Like, imagine what it would be like if we could be a bit more like the boy in that John Lewis advert who was just so excited to be able to give that present to his parents. Didn't even think about his own presents. Just ran straight past them and took the present into his parents' room. How cool would it be if we could be a community that just worship Jesus with our whole lives, because our eyes are so fixed on him and we know that he is so worth it. He is so worth sacrificing all the treasures of this world, because he's just so good and he's so worth it. So we're just going to take a minute to invite the Holy Spirit and just to fix our eyes on him and just remind ourselves that actually he is so worthy of all of our lives. He is worth these sacrifices that we make that sometimes can seem quite small, sometimes can seem quite big, but we know that he's always worth it. So I'm just going to pray and invite the Holy Spirit, and then the band are going to come back up.